Welcome to the Noble Ape Podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this serves as the March 2008 Mailout. I almost want to say this is a continuation of the Biota Podcast, which I think gives some indication of the amount of audio that's currently being recorded for the Biota Podcast stream, perhaps in stark contrast to the Ape Reality stream. Again, I have to apologise for this. I think the needs with regards to the Biota community are currently taking a lot of my time. However, as I have said in previous podcasts, I'd like to see more artificial life developers getting at least chapters even into books, and I've just submitted a chapter proposal to a fellow in Malaysia with regards to his book on artificial life emergence for science, business and engineering. It will be on the Noble Ape cognitive simulation if I get accepted, and it'll be a great opportunity to wrap for an extended set of pages with regards to this technology that I'm frequently asked to describe and have a kind of 3-minute condensed description, but the ability to write on it to a greater extent and also for an academic book will be a wonderful thing indeed. Probably put a number of the ideas and discoveries made through the development of the Noble Ape cognitive simulation out to a broader audience, which is always a good thing. So, news for this month. With the EvoGrid discussion going on in the Biota podcast feed and on various mailing lists, I developed an XML phenotype output for the Noble Ape simulation earlier this month in order to explain to perhaps folks on the EvoGrid mailing list and perhaps other folk exactly what I thought a phenotype output would look like, or phenotype XML output more importantly. So, how was that received? Well, it was received very positively. I was, I think, the only simulator to actually generate some kind of talking point XML output, and it also got me thinking about aspects of the Noble Ape simulation. Some of the feedback I received from Pedro in particular was that the XML phenotype output would be really good as a means of internally describing aspects of the Noble Ape simulation as well. Obviously, the phenotype component wouldn't necessarily be the best method. However, there are a number of ways that the XML could be used internally as a means of creating a distributed version of the Noble Ape simulation amongst other ideas. So that I certainly took on board in terms of something to think about for Noble Ape simulation implementations in the future. In terms of the current Noble Ape simulation state, I just haven't been investing the kind of hours into it as I had in former months, in part due to the extended Biota Live and Biota podcast related duties, but also because sometimes it's actually quite nice to take a breather. I think if my chapter proposal is accepted, then I will be spending a lot of time, or a lot more time, should I say, with the cognitive simulation, particularly as a section of the chapter details my early AGAR simulations and how they moved into the Noble Ape cognitive simulation. I do have some examples of the early AGAR simulation in the back of the original manuals, and I've been thinking recently that I should release an updated version of the original manuals, not updated with any new information, but I have probably about 20 image plates that would go in interleaving pages in the original manual and add a kind of more aesthetic angle to it. I think of it really as a kind of collector's item in some regard, even though it's easily available through the Cafe Press Noble Ape site. But I think just to add something that was perhaps more aesthetically pleasing and just talk more about the mythology, or describe the mythology rather in the plates, which represented my original notebooks and various sketches that I drew while I was writing the original manuals. So I like this idea of creating something that is probably more a coffee table book than necessarily staying on a bookshelf. However, there's a long way to go with regards to the original manuals. From the XML phenotype out, what does that mean in terms of getting other third-party graphics engines, these kind of things, into accepting the phenotype output in their particular renderers? Well, that's a long way coming. My hope through this EvoGrid discussion, and I have given candid narrative to this in the past through this podcast, but my hope is that people, developers, actual folks writing code get involved and start doing that. I think it's probably a long-term project within a kind of 3-year time frame, and there are certainly going to be a number of releases of the Noble Ape simulation over that period of time. So now I've done the initial development with regards to the phenotype output, I think there are a number of more pressing concerns with the Noble Ape simulation currently, and I will return to those. My hope with regards to producing Digital Ape Realities has gone a little flat recently, but I think there are a number of topics that can be revisited, particularly as I work on this chapter, if the proposal is accepted, which would detail aspects of the cognitive simulation which I haven't explicitly mentioned in these podcasts to date, and perhaps talk a bit more about the background methodology and a little bit more about AGAR simulation. I mean, when you talk about artificial life simulations, AGAR simulations are pretty fundamental, and yet there are very few examples of rich AGAR simulations out there. Maybe there is a need for a rich AGAR simulation in the existing set of artificial life projects. Maybe something will come out of it through the proposed chapter. I haven't heard anything more from Dick Gordon with regards to his book. I did make reference to it in my proposal submission because I do believe it is coming out in the middle of this year. However, I haven't heard any more from him, and I have had some other correspondence with Dick Gordon, so my hope is eventually I will be either handed a copy of the book or given a draft to finally look over and make any corrections as needed. It will be an interesting publication when it comes out, and I'm interested to hear more from folks who maybe have picked up the book and are reading it and are now going back through the Apereality podcast feed and hearing me now in some kind of surreal time shifting. So anyway, not a lot of news really this month, in part due to Biota Live. If you haven't checked out Biota Live yet, we've recorded a number of interesting topics and a number of topics that ground to a halt, and it's quite an interesting medium in terms of just the number of participants you can get involved and the kind of jamming sessions you can have. As you may hear in recent Biota Lives, sometimes things just get a bit out of control, and really it's an interesting mechanism as the administrator of this environment as well, particularly as you're herding people to speak at particular times and you've got to organise almost like flight traffic control or something with regards to some of the ideas. It's quite a striking thing because I need to be constantly meta-thinking about that as I am listening to what the folks are saying. So an interesting process, but I think the format is actually working. Always interested in your feedback, tom@nobleape.com. If you have any questions with regards to the Noble Ape simulation, particularly the cognitive simulation, questions about what I'm going to be writing about specifically in the book, I don't mind emailing the chapter proposal to folks who want to get in contact. Thank you all very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.